Research in our union's history. Do you, Chair?
Okay, well, thanks for inviting us, and also thanks for allowing us to write the book about the centenary of the Fire Brigades Union. And I'm saying that on behalf of myself, Tessa Wright, who's from Queen Mary's, from Greenwich University, and our other colleague, Professor Phil Taylor, who's at Strathclyde, and he couldn't be here today. But we're all trade unionists, we're on strike at the moment over pay, and we're all performance managed. So to do something like this is really fantastic and gives us that sort of time off the horrible pressure we face with management in the public sector at the moment, like you do. So what I'm going to do is just go through quite quickly the proposal we put for the book, which isn't set in stone, and we're very happy to hear from you, hear ideas, and might change as we go through and talk to people. But yeah, I'll start off and tell you what we've planned. So we did actually have an initial title which was Fighting Fire, but obviously that's very close to Shane's book, so I think we'll have to rethink that, and again ideas would be gratefully received on what we can call it, but we thought the Fighting Fire maybe reflected the sort of battles and the intensity of battles you've had over the past decades. And what we've been asked to do is to do a history of the FBU over the past 3 decades. So that's what we're concentrating on. Obviously, that's going to be placed within the context of your history, and particularly things like the history of the pay formula, the 1977 dispute, which everybody talks about. So there'll be a firm historical context, but the body of the book will be concentrating on the past 3 decades. So what we're basing the book on is documentary sources, and we're very excited about the presentation from Helen at the Warwick Archive, because we're going to be needing to look at those documents and any other documents that the union's got or you've got in your regions that you think are of interest. And then it's going to be about a combination of rank and file accounts and leadership perspectives. So we've been given a list of key people to interview, and we've started doing that. Some of you we've interviewed already, some of you will be approaching. We're sort of taking it, I suppose, region by region. So Phil Taylor has started in Scotland, and fortunately he was able to get to speak to Ken Cameron earlier in the year. I started in Essex because I wanted to capture the control staff dispute there as it was happening, but I'm ready now to move on to other regions, and Tessa's interviewed a number of people, I think, from the South East as well. So we're moving through as the year goes on, so expect an email from us. So we will very much want the history to be in the words of the members, so to capture your experiences, to capture your views, and hopefully to have some nice chunks of text which people can read with quotes from yourselves in it. And so, but placing that obviously within a political context, and looking at the ideological and political role of the union in shaping service and shaping conditions of work and experiences of work. So we want to integrate the testimonies of members to reflect the experience of the range of membership. So obviously we wanted to be representative in terms of gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality and age. Also geographically, so Scotland, Wales and the north of England, recognising those local and national differences, but also to make sure that the experiences of the control staff and retained firefighters are reflected as well. So the introduction will contain some historical context. So the last 3 decades in the broader history of the FBU, in particular the history is written by Bailey and Bradford. Locating the union within the wider political context, the obviously experience of union decline in the past decades, changes in patterns of collective bargaining, lower levels of industrial action, and attacks on public services, and particularly the context of austerity. So locating the union within the wider union history of the past decades. So we want a timeline of key events, and then we'll just summarise each of the individual chapters in the introduction. The first chapter, we think at the moment, although as I said this could change, things could be reordered, we might need to think about different themes. But the first chapter is we want to focus on the changing work of firefighters, how that's changed in the past 3 decades. So in the context of the political economy of the fire service, i.e. cuts, that's been intensifying, and it's particularly intensive at the moment. looking at the so-called modernisation agenda, things like flexible crewing, how's that changed people's lives and the experience of their working lives, shift to prevention and fire safety, looking at the impact of the Fire and Rescue Services Bill 2004, again the defence of the Grey Book, the review of firefighters' conditions of service in 2014, and then a bit about the occupational identity of the membership, the watch system, how that underpins collective organisation and collective identity and collectivism. So that would be that chapter. The second chapter we focus on will be pay and pensions. Obviously the wider context is the 1977 strike and pay formula, but we will be particularly focusing on the recent pay freezes, increasing pay inequality between chief officers and your members, the tax on pensions and the campaign over pensions. So looking at the history of the pay formula and how you defended that formula, and then moving on particularly in that context to the 2002-2003 strike. So the background of the strike, the main review, how you organise strike action, how the FBU organises strike action generally, and then the experience of industrial action for the membership. Obviously that will vary between regions, but looking at how that industrial action impacts on the lives of people taking strike action, and then going on to the outcome of the dispute, which might capture a range of different perspectives on that. Chapter 4 is going to be about promoting equality and diversity, and Tessa's going to talk about that in a minute. But that chapter will look at brief history of women in the FBU, also black workers in the FBU, the role of FBU in promoting equality, the amazing record that the FBU has in leading self-organisation amongst women and black workers, and then moving on to more recent issues of thematic review, the changing composition of the fire service, and then installing of equality measures and diversity through the fire service agenda, and obviously also through staff freezes. And then to pick up some of the experiences of women firefighters, BAME and LGBT firefighters. Chapter 5 is going to look at this beyond the union and the FBU's leadership in terms of international solidarity, which obviously it's got a strong record on. Political alliances, when we started with it was going to be about disaffiliation, but now of course we're going to look at reaffiliation, and having heard Matt speak last night, position of FBU on the referendum, whatever its outcome. And this chapter will be focusing on defending the service and how the regional branches have made local coalitions against cuts with local communities, and we definitely want to capture those campaigns. Chapter 6, we wanted to talk a bit about activism and the next generation. So how the union's organising, how it's recruiting, membership, its organising strategy, political education and communication, which is obviously a key aspect of the FBU, and then maybe to reflect some of the experience of younger activists and how they see the union, how they're taking up the legacy, and then to look at some of the key local disputes, maybe the recent Essex dispute and some of the other ones which we've seen in the past few years, but I'm sure we'll see some more this year. And then finally, a chapter on the future, the role of the fire service. We've discussed this morning, where it's going to lie organisationally, the relationship with the police service, whether that's going to change. But also maybe some of the work that Paul's done on changing environmental conditions and the role of the fire service in climate change. So we'll have to see what we've got for that chapter, but that's there at the moment. So that's the structure of the book. We're really happy to take comments, what your views are, whether we've got it right, whether anything we've missed out. It's the balance, I think, is we don't want to doom and gloom about fighting cuts, but we want to celebrate the really strong history of the union in terms of international work on equality and defending members' home conditions.
Thanks, Sharon. We're now moving on to our next speaker, Tessa Wright, who's a senior lecturer in the Human Resources Management at Queen Mary University, and she'll give us an insight into the struggle for equality that we've seen.
Excuse me, could I have any questions?
Yeah, we're having question and answers at the end of both speakers.
Okay, got the right presentation, but unfortunately the top of it, the title slightly slipped off. So yeah, like John said, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to work on this book, because it's a really interesting project. And I'm very happy to be doing it also because I have done previous research with women firefighters and also with LGBT firefighters in previous projects I've done. So I've sort of interviewed various members of the FBU, particularly the equality sections, over the years. So it's very nice to be sort of coming back to an area that I was kind of, have been interested in for some time. Better get on, because obviously it's a difficult thing to be presenting when a football match is about to be on, so we need to make sure we get through it. So the research, first thing to say is that this is very much work in progress. So I'm not presenting you today with an authoritative picture of equality and diversity in the fire service and the FBU, because the research is ongoing. So we have done some interviews with people here and key FBU people and activists, but we also have quite a number of other people that we want to speak to. So this is a sort of a partial picture, but this is our kind of initial view. As I said, it's based on some of the previous research that I've done, but also that other people have done, and looking at key documents. So there's a long history of women in the fire service, as Terry Seegers, who's here today, knows well. So this section here is taken from a chapter that Terry has written in the Bailey book about the fire service. But women were involved in the fire service and the FBU during the Second World War in quite substantial numbers in the 40s, both in the auxiliary fire service and the national fire service. Mostly they were involved in roles such as control, typing, cooking, but there's also evidence that Terry presents of women as drivers and pump operators, and even in some areas some women-only crews and fire stations. However, there was opposition to women undertaking these roles, both from the Home Office and also from the FBU, citing women's lack of stamina for these roles. So sort of an interesting kind of arguments really starting around that time. It was also pointed out that women didn't receive equal pay to men at that time. So although some of the roles women were doing were different, there were also some women and men doing the same roles, but women still got about 2/3 of male pay. And the FBU called for equal pay at a National Women's Conference in 1943, and this was achieved in 1972 for women in control. So quite significant membership of the FBU in 1943, over 8,000. Of course, after the war, this dropped back to around 500. So coming to the more recent period, the GLC, the Great London Council, equal opportunity policy sort of turned attention to getting women into the fire service in London, particularly in the 1980s. So that's when women first joined as whole-time firefighters, and as one of the kind of measures to get women and also black and minority ethnic firefighters into the service in London, there were pre-entry courses, so people who had traditionally joined the fire service had a chance to kind of find out whether it was a kind of a job that they wanted to do would be suitable for them, to help prepare them for the entrance procedures. They were considered to be effective in terms of changing the patterns of recruitment. And I've spoken to Sian Griffiths, who joined in 1985 in London, and she says here, I think most people thought that we probably weren't going to be there very long, that it was just a bit of a fad and nothing had to change. Well, she retired after 13 years last year, so she proved them wrong, I think. But at the time, so the experiences around, in the early days of women, BME and LGBT firefighters, a lot of very difficult times for people who were sort of newly coming into a very male-dominated culture. Many people thought it was no job for a woman, it's a common view that women shouldn't really be doing the job. Women faced the lack of facilities, toilet facilities, dormitories, sleeping facilities, uniforms that didn't fit, difficulty getting PPE